Our first question asks us to factor each of the following, and you'll see that all four of those examples are trinomials. And you'll also notice that every one of these trinomials begins with a coefficient of 1. Remember, when you can't see the numerical coefficient in front of a term, that coefficient is 1. Well, when we have a trinomial where the first term is degree 2, the second term is degree 1. Now when I say degree 2, I mean the exponent is 2. The second term is degree 1 because the exponent is 1. And the third term is degree 0 because we don't see the variable there, and technically that means it's x to the 0. When we have a trinomial in this friendly form, we can do something to factor it called the sum and product method. That's what we're going to practice. Well, the first question, x squared plus 9x plus 14 is our requested question. So what we do is we look for two numbers that add to this middle term and add to the coefficient of the middle term and multiply to the last term. So in other words, what two numbers have a sum of 9 and a product of 14? We can try various numbers that add up to 9. 6 times 3 would be 14. 5 times 4 would be 20. Finally, we settle on the numbers 7 and 2. 7 plus 2 equals 9, and 7 times 2 equals 14. Well, because that's true, we can then rewrite this polynomial as x plus 7 times x plus 2. And although we don't show it here, we know that if x multiplied x, we'd get x squared. And then if x multiplied positive 2, we'd get positive 2x. And if positive 7 multiplied x, we'd get positive 7x. And we would then collect those two terms and get positive 9x. And finally, when the positive 7 multiplied the positive 2, we'd get positive 14. So the sum and product method works. We move to the next question. X squared minus 11x plus 30. Well, again, this is in our friendly form. Leading coefficient is 1, degree 2, degree 1, degree 0. And so we look for two numbers with a sum of negative 11 and a product of 30. And this is where sometimes people get confused because they say, well, how can two numbers add up to a negative and multiply to a positive? And what we forget sometimes is that two negative numbers multiply to be a positive number. So when you see a positive number as your product, in other words, as your final term, that means you're looking for two positive numbers or you're looking for two negative numbers. So in this case, we look for two negative numbers that add up to negative 11. Those numbers are negative 6 and negative 5, because negative 6 plus negative 5 is negative 11. Negative 6 times negative 5 is positive 30. And that's our answer. X minus 6 quantity times x minus 5 quantity. Our third question, x squared plus 4x minus 45. Now this gets a little bit tricky as well because what we have is a negative product but a positive sum. So we want two numbers that add up to 4 and multiply to negative 45. And with a little practice we realize that what this means, this negative product, this means that we want two numbers, one of which is negative and one of which is positive, because the only way two numbers can multiply to become a negative number is if you have a positive and a negative. Well, we think, what two numbers multiply to 45? And our answers are 9 and 5. They could also be 15 and 3, or even 45 and 1 for that matter. But we settle on 9 and 5, and then we ask ourselves, is there any way to put a negative sign in front of one of those numbers such that the sum of them is 4? Well, we know that negative 9 plus positive 5 would be negative 4, but we know that positive 9 plus negative 5 would be positive 4, and positive 9 times negative 5 would be negative 45. So we have our numbers, positive 9 and negative 5. So there's our two factors, x plus 9 quantity times x minus 5 quantity. Finally, our next question, x squared minus x minus 42. Well, a number of times I've seen students say that they're looking for two numbers with a sum of 0. That's not true. When we have a polynomial and there's a term with a variable but no visible coefficient, that coefficient is a 1. In this case, because of the negative sign, it's a negative 1. So we're looking for two numbers that add to negative 1 multiplied to negative 42. So what two numbers, one negative and one positive, fit those criteria? And I know it's one negative and one positive because of that negative product. The answers are negative 7 and positive 6. So my sum is negative 1, my product is negative 42, so my numbers are negative 7 and positive 6. Think about it, negative 7 plus positive 6 is negative 1. Negative 7 times positive 6 is negative 42, and we get our factored expression x minus 7 quantity times x plus 6 quantity.